Um, in the first place, like I started, if we had gone into that independence conference with one voice, we should have been able to negotiate better and for us to be able to harness better opportunities. But because we went divided selfishly, without even acknowledging those who sacrificed, who spilled their blood for the liberation of Sierra Leone, without acknowledging their efforts, we went there divided, with our own motives different, without for us not to even have that. And you know what? Manipulation strives on divisions. And as much as we are divided, we will not engage meaningfully that will help us actually have a better Sierra Leone as to what we are expecting. And so because of that division we went with, that is what eventually led us into having wars in this country. And because one party is making him or herself, available as opposed to the other party who is looking for the interests of the country. These other parties making itself available as to how best they will see them as a better options to this, not the interests of the country. Let's take, for instance, the transition of what had been the engagement before colonization. Let's go into slavery, which was the vogue of the time. And of course, slavery was abandoned. And then we also, the colonial powers saw the need to go into a conference for the partition of Africa in order to extract raw materials for their industries abroad. So, and at a time like that, when they were deciding to give us independence, but with the view of extracting raw materials, that was when we as citizens should have come together to have a better mind, to sit and discuss, looking at the interest, what's the interest of our colonial powers, how do we discuss, now that we are going into independence, how do we discuss so that the raw materials they are extracting from Sierra Leone, how do we benefit from those? And so because we went divided, one particular set of the country's population seemed to be making these raw materials available at a cost that is at the expense of the nation, whilst the other party is looking at it as to how best the country can benefit. So it's all as a result of the division that we have not been able to benefit as much as we are supposed to have been benefited. Because of the division, we went into that conference without paying much attention, and that actually eventually led us to war. And so after the war, we've come back with so many opportunities, having, of course, an expatriate at a point in time, I would say, in the helm of affairs, who was President Kaba, who was able to harness resources for the rebuilding of Sierra Leone. And he did his best by ensuring that we were able to have the war finished, and at the same time have governance structures in place, created new institutions, and also he was able to ensure that Sierra Leone was debt-free. And aside of that, he was able to actually, he was able to leave substantial amount for the incoming administration to be able to start off. Contrary to that, we've had the APC-led regime under the leadership of President Ernest Bai Koroma, who came in, starting off from at least a very reasonable economy. And of course, under their regime, they had a buoyant economic boom, yet because of poor management or economic mismanagement, we are left with what I would say austerity. In other words, the economy was at the brink of collapse. And so for us as a party, the SLPP government, we approach the economy with a different wavelength, which has helped us to be able to still maintain the economy and still help progression in the economy as it is. So what approach did we use? At the time when all donor partners have left, they've turned their back on Sierra Leone because of poor economic management, we came in. In the first 3 months, even when we had our flagship project to roll out without economy, but in the first 3 months, because of we came in with sound economic policies that is diversifying the economy and seeing how best we can mobilize revenue from different quarters, because largely since 1930, Sierra Leone has been heavily dependent on the extractive industry as the main source of revenue for our economic growth. And so the SLPP administration saw it that, no, we need to approach our economic management from a different wavelength. So in an event we are faced with any shock globally, we'll be able to still sustain, or we'll still come in as a resilient nation to survive whatever shock. But if we peg our dependency on just one sector of the country's economy, and if there's any shock in that, it affects us as a nation, and it affects our growth. And so we approach that differently with the single treasury account and also the diversification of the economy. That is helping us so much that we are making progress now, that in spite of the fact that this particular administration in all its terms, it had experienced a series of challenges, not locally, but globally as well, but yet we have done our best because of the prudent economic management to still sustain the country's economy and still manage the country's fiscal policy and having the country still running. And now we are not only dependent on the mining sector, we're also looking at the agricultural sector and also service sector that is also helping in our revenue generation to help the country move. In terms of governance, yes, we are not there yet because of our past experience of what we experienced before the war. And so that mindset, corruption and all the rest. So we came in with, of course, with an approach to rebrand the image of governance, and at the same time also rebrand the image of the country. And so it has been challenging because people have been accustomed to one way of governance practices in the nation, which is selfish in nature, which is probably gearing towards their own personal benefits. But as a government, we came in with the mindset that as a nation, we need to rebrand our mentality, our mindset, as to how much we can see this nation move forward. And so in all of those approaches we have used for us to actually move the country forward, we've been able to make progress such that as it is now, the economy is making a slow, even though slow, but it's making progress in terms of what we are receiving from the mining sector, which is the extractive sector, the agricultural sector, looking at the industries that are in now within the agricultural spheres, especially for, we now have institutions, industries that are now adding value additions to our local products we are producing in this country, and also with also new reviews in our laws. We have been able to put ourselves in a better position as to how we can also add our beneficiation from the extractive industries. Because if you look at what had happened before, like we're going into mining agreements or laws have been passed in Parliament with not much interest for the progress of the nation, save for 3% royalties. In most of our agreements we've passed, that has been the only source of benefit for the nations apart from taxes. With the review in the laws, we are now positioned in such a way that even the states should now be able to participate commercially in the extractive industries by going into either shares with other investment companies, having the shared ventures where we venture into extractions and see how best we can benefit 50-50s. Apart from that also, the state, with the new laws or the reviews of our mining laws, the state also stands to benefit at least 10% equity, which is also an improvement that this administration has made so far in helping improve the livelihood of our citizens and also put the country in a better state. So yes, if we had approached independence with the mindset of unity, devoid of our disagreements, but let's see how much we could have entered that negotiation with our colonial masters for the benefit of Sierra Leone. I am very certain we would have far gone beyond where we are today. But as a country, we think we have maintained a progressive mindset. Even after the war, we've still seen ourselves as a nation that we need to work collectively. We need to work together to see how much we can harness our resources, whether human, whether agricultural, whether extractive, for the benefit of Sierra Leone. Sidi?
Well, I mean, since independence, every governance structure that we had a focus. Um, if you, I'll just focus, since we don't have much time, I'll focus from the Anescoma era today. I mean, prior to him ascending into governance, of course, we had interregnums wherein we've had military regimes, we've had one of the most civil, brutal war in this country that caused us a lot of brain drains, infrastructural damages to our nation, even affected our nation's economy. We took over from the SLPP government of Ahmed Tijan Kaba with, probably 5 megawatts electricity, for example, and we improved on that. By the time we left office, we had over 100 megawatts electricity, with more than 60 megawatts in Freetown, and over 50 chiefdoms connected through the rural electrification program. We had over 2,000 kilometers of roads done in this country, first class. All of our major roads connecting the cities and the two neighboring countries were done under former President Ernest Bai Koroma. We focused on the agenda for change, which transformed this nation in terms of education, infrastructure, energy, education. We came in with the agenda for prosperity in the second term. We focused on diversifying the economy. So if you hear Lema talking about, single treasury account, for example, this was the initiative of the Ernest Bai Koroma government. If you hear him talking about diversifying the economy, focusing on tourism and extractive industries, these were the initiative of the Ernest Bai Koroma government, because we felt it was time for us to transform this nation. And in terms of economic management, we have never experienced a boom in this country under any government like we saw in the Ernest Bai Koroma government. At some point before the Ebola and before the fall in the prices of the iron ore, we were the fastest growing economy. And that reflected on the lives of the people of this country, which is why we were able to give granting aid to students in universities. We were able to offer free scholarships to female students, offering sciences and technology courses from elementary level all the way to university level, which is why we were able to reduce the cost of education for university students to a bare minimum. And we saw also the introduction of the free healthcare and the improvement of the health sector generally. We introduced the maternal death audit. We introduced schools of midwifery across this country, which led to the increase in the number of midwives, which resulted in the reduction of maternal and infant mortality in this country. So if you hear today that the maternal and infant mortality has dropped in Sierra Leone, it is as a result of those interventions that we took as a government to focus on maternal death audits and to focus on maternal health and infant health in this country. We improved on immunization, took it from a bare 43% to over 70% or 80% by the time Ernest Bai Koroma left governance. Nutrition increased greatly under the reign of President Ernest Bai Koroma also. So you saw that under our governance structure, we were on the trajectory of growth and prosperity. We had taken off as a nation, and it was important, and it is important for people to understand this. I always hear people talk about austerity. Austerity is in no way a bad connotation. Austerity measures were put in place because at that time we needed prudent economic management. We had just come out of Ebola, wherein we saw a GDP growth of 20% reduced to minus 21% as a result of the Ebola virus disease. So we needed to introduce measures that will help us bounce back as a nation. And when we introduced those economic management measures that we now know as austerity, it helped us regain our GDP. And we left a GDP growth of about 3.5% to 5% steady growth, which we handed over to the current administration, with a reserve of over $500 million that we handed over to them. An economy that will struggle, will not have a reserve. But we had enough, and we had reserve of over $500 million. That is 6 months, of any activity, any emergency that will happen. We would have been able to sustain ourselves for 6 good months. That is the reserve that we handed over to this administration. I mean, I was not really here to, usher blames. I really wanted us to come here and have meaningful discussions and look at really structural programs that we feel we can discuss to transform this nation. But of course today, despite the figures that Lema is throwing at us, we know how our economy is. We have the worst revenue mobilization in the history of our country. Our domestic revenue mobilization stand at 9.8% to GDP. So for every $100 that we own as a country, it is only about $9 or so that it is revenue that we generated. The rest, the $91 or so, are debt. So you cannot look at an economy like that and you say you are progressing. I'll tell you that even as we speak, there are people who have not received their salaries for the last month. We have way gone past that under the Ernest Microma administration. So these are the struggles and the challenges that we continue to face as a country that we really need to look at. Look, for us in opposition, the APC, we proffered solution when we came in 2007, between 2007 to 2018. And we still believe we can proffer solution. And I'll start talking about some. Let us take energy, for example. We know for sure that our country has increased in terms of population. If you look at Freetown, for example, more and more communities have established. And the size of our city has, expanded. The number of inhabitants have increased, which means we need more energy needs. Now, I will think that the best way to approach this for now, we need to zone our city. We continue to rely on one single energy source, and we buy transformers to serve communities. What we really need are substations. You take, for example, one substation to serve the entire Godrich area. You take one substation to serve the entire Aberdeen, Wilkinson Road area. You take one substation, because with the transformers now, when the energy comes, you notice that the electricity goes off and on, and because we have trips. When the energy loads come, the transformers don't take the loads from the community, so they trip, it goes off. And then when it comes, we have the issues of bad light, electricity, and now we have in houses, getting burned, communities, people are losing their properties because of that. So we need to begin to look at these innovative ideas. The same with water. We still rely on the same Guma Dam that was constructed to serve 350,000 people in the city, a city that has grown to close to 2 million people today. When you go around this city, every community has some form of water source. We have to be innovative enough to harness these water sources so that every community has its own dam to supply safe drinking water to those communities, as opposed to relying on that single Guma dam that does not have the capacity to serve the entire Freetown as it is now. So these are ways that we have to start approaching things. And for God's sake, my colleague here has spoken a lot about extractive minerals, especially, but believe me, we are not earning up to 10%. And I'll take you to the recent statement from the Minister of Mines himself. For 2024, according to their source, we exported about $754 million worth of minerals out of Sierra Leone. And what did we receive as a country? It was $22 million. That is mere 2.8 to 3%. That is not up to 10%. I mean, this is our main source of revenue. Over $700 million exported, and we only got $22 million as a country. That is unacceptable. So, and this is not something that you can just attribute to a single government. We have a responsibility as a country to sit, review, some of these laws and see how much we can benefit more, especially from our extractives. If you go to the fisheries sector, the marine sector, it is the same story. We are not benefiting much. You go to the tourism sector, it is the same story. We are not benefiting much. So it is time for us really to move away from the, having to attach politics to some of these national issues, to really look at these issues with a national lens, have meaningful discussions. My brother, we always talk about development plans, but we have never really focused on developing an investment plan for this country. And that is why when you look at our city generally, you'll see in one sector hundreds of traders trading the same product. In the evening, just drive along Wilkinson Road, for example. You will see 20 people, 20 girls or guys having oranges on their heads. The same thing, 20 of them, or 20 people lined up selling bread on the same route. It will not occur to one person that, okay, my colleague here is selling bread, let me bring my Kool-Aid on the side. So when you buy the bread, you'll have the urge to buy the Kool-Aid. Instead, they will all be selling bread. You go along the beach, thousands of beach bars doing the same thing. So these are practical ways we ought to start looking at our nation and see how much we can change the mindset, have a solid investment plan. We're struggling with foreign exchange, for example. Just between Sierra Leone and Guinea, or among Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, if we properly formalize the trade that happened among these three countries, believe you me, we will have a solid, steady source of foreign exchange. But of course, we have not done that. So we allow a lot of smuggling to happen. So unless and until we start looking at, these practical and innovative ways of doing things, we will continue to struggle. So for us in the APC, that is the approach that we'll have to use when we take back governance in this country. We have looked at the country, we have zoned this nation, and I'll tell you, community by community, we know what the problems are, and we are starting to proffer solutions. Discussions must happen between the government and the opposition. That is also one way that we can address a lot of the problems that we have.
Yeah, so largely he has just concurred with some of the issues I raised. The fact that he was trying to deviate from some of the things that were achieved under the SLPP administrations in terms of trunk routes, a very good number of trunk routes. Of course, we are achieved under President Kaba. Yes, the APC did the implementation. For some, whether the implementation was done in terms of the agreement that was contracted by the President Kaba's administration, that was something also this administration also looked at, and the records are out there. He has agreed with me that most of the mining laws or agreements